Hello, I'm Nan Simonson, and I am the author of Aging Powerfully, my book that includes a memoir, a relatively short one, about growing up the way some of us do, with situations that formed us in ways that we then had to untangle. And it's not about that. The book, Aging Powerfully, is about me and my journey through lifestyle medical and lifestyle medicine. I'm a health coach with a practice called Lifestyle Medical in Riverside, California, which is where I live. And lifestyle medicine, I am an affiliate member of the College of Lifestyle Medicine and a health coach with Dr. Dysinger, one of the founders of the College of Lifestyle Medicine. And my strongest imperative is to pass on what I have learned and the reality of our being able to, in to the greatest degree, be able to conduct and direct our future as it relates to our health, and therefore as it relates to actually how we move forward in our lives regardless of age. I was listening to a podcast this morning, Chef AJ interviewing a cardiac RN who's been working with people with severe cardiac disease for the past 30 years. And then she went into, whole food plant-based and lifestyle medicine efforts to reverse what she had worked on for so long with nothing but pills and procedures, which never turned things around, as she acknowledged. But she made a statement that really surprised me. She said, you know what? By the time people are 50% of our population has either diabetes or prediabetes, is obese or very overweight, and is experiencing the metabolic changes that go along with that, and or have cardiovascular disease. Now, these things are so common that we kind of don't even think about it anymore as a big deal or a crisis. The problem is, these are the things that become the stories of people who live their lives tenuously, fearful of the next shoe to drop health wise. But that's not why I'm here. The title of this live presentation, Facebook Live, is 2 weeks in Canada and my takeaway. And it has something to do with that. That's the thing. I can't separate them. And I'll explain that a little bit. But so we spent 2 weeks in Canada, in the far eastern end of the British Columbia province of Canada, and the more western end of the province of Alberta. So we flew into Calgary and drove 3 hours up into the Canadian Rockies, way up north. We ended up staying at an Airbnb. Each of our three stays were at an Airbnb because we like to control our environment, and most important for us is to have a kitchen and a way of preparing our own food, because we don't want to have to eat every meal to get a good meal in a restaurant. In 2 weeks, that would be, if we ate 3 meals a day, that would be 40 something meals out, and we just don't do that when we travel. And I'll talk about that. I won't even finish that sentence. But so we stay in Airbnbs, and the first one was up in a little town called Golden, and again 3 hours north of Calgary, in the eastern end of British Columbia, and it was in the woods. This couple had 80 acres, and they had cabins, and we had the most remote of these charming cabins. This one happened to have been built 40 years ago. It was even there before they bought this property, and the husband began building these lovely little homes, really. They weren't like log cabins. They were wonderful little homes. And it was in the woods. As a matter of fact, our second day there, in our screened porch, there was a bear rummaging through the dead base of a tree for whatever they rummage for, and I'm guessing it's grubs, and that was kind of cool. And I'll mention bears a little bit later as well. And then we spent 6 days there, and we went south. We visited Lake Louise and the historic Fairmont Chateau that was built on the edge of that lake. And this lake is in what they call a energy, what did they call it? There are mountains surrounding it that have glacial snow caps, and the lake is deep, and they call it an energy vortex. Isn't that a wonderful word? Energy vortex. And they believe that there are some physiological benefits and powers in being in this concentration of magnetic energy in the earth. And we only visited for the day and dined at the Fairmont Chateau, and then we went down 15. Well, I don't know. That wasn't 15 anything. Anyway, then we went down past Banff to Canmore, which is 15 minutes from Banff, and we stayed there and spent 6 days there, and then went back down to Calgary. So what was my takeaway? This is a beautiful country. Tim and I, now we had been in Vancouver. Vancouver's a city, and we were there for a couple of days before we went to Alaska, and that was several years ago. I had been in Quebec for a week. I had been in Montreal, so that's the far east end, and in Toronto, which is south of Quebec. And so it wasn't that I had never been to Canada, or my husband Tim hadn't, but we hadn't experienced the mountains and the back countries of Canada, and we decided that we wanted a little bit more of that. And we had decided that when we had taken in 5 of the national parks. We spent a few weeks, going national park to national park up to Glacier National Park in the U.S. And in mid-June, they finally opened the road that allowed us to get through into Glacier Park and stay in a place where they had buffalo, and that was kind of wonderful. And Tim said at that time, I want to keep going north, and I want to go into the Rocky Mountains of Canada. Well, that's what we ended up doing. We were in the Rocky Mountains up in Golden, and the Rocky Mountains in the forests in Canada for 6 days. And we hiked, and we dined out only a couple of times, and that's usually lunch when we go out. Because we have our breakfasts in, and again, I'll talk about that. And it's beautiful country, and it's so green. And although the weather report, because we looked at it on the phone, indicated that we would see rain any given day, and quite often day after day after day, they were short little bursts of a little bit of water, and then that was it. So it didn't affect what we did. We went hiking into, just outside of Golden, into the woods for an hour and a half, and came upon something called Wapta Falls. And it was an energetic, wide fall, and it was beautiful. And we went to the shore of that, down, climbed up to see it, climbed down to get to the shore of that, and spent some time there. Had lunch that we brought with us, and that was just lovely. And then hiked back. And Canada is gorgeous, but it's rugged. There are one of the things that I was told before we went is, don't just think you can hike willy-nilly into the woods in Canada. There are bears, and there are bears in the US. There are grizzly bears. Well, there's only a few grizzly bears in the US, maybe 14, I think I looked it up, maybe 1,400 up to 1,700 at the time, whatever I had read uh, at that time, and I think that was before 2020 actually. And there are 26,000 or more grizzly bears in Canada, and most of them are in British Columbia, and that's where we were. So I went in there scared. And Tim, who has camped his entire life and knows about backpacking, even though I had backpacked when I was in my 20s with my late husband, it was in Yosemite, and we weren't going to see any dangerously predatory bears. So I was nervous while I was there, and we should have prepared. Tim, as I said, had camped and hiked his entire life in the U.S., and said, oh, they're not going to come anywhere near us. That's just not what they do. And yet everything I read about backpack or about hiking in the forests indicated that you should be in groups, that you should make a lot of noise, and that you should always carry bear spray. And we didn't have any bear spray with us. He just kept saying no because he thought that was silly. And on one of our walks, and this was a walk that we took in Banff, way into the forest to see a meadow, an alpine meadow, we came upon two big piles of bear poop. One that was so new that it was still soft and, clearly new, and a bear print right by the lake that we were at. But I did something that annoyed the heck out of Tim because I wasn't going to be dissuaded. We're two alpha people, and he says A and I say B, and we both stick with it. And I just wasn't going to back down. And that was that I still had the fear that, and Canadians, and everywhere I went, I said, so, do you hike? Well, yes, I do. Do you carry bear spray? Always, even on my bike rides. And so a Canadian said that, and one woman, when we rented bikes in Canmore, because we rode up to Banff on our bikes, we did a 35-mile ride that day up to Banff and back again, and dined in Banff and did some hiking around, and then later went back to Banff and hiked some more. And she said to me, she said, I can't think of a worse way of dying than by a bear. So I'm telling you, this is where I was at. So what I did, I have this, I always carry this with me, and this is my, it's just, well, it's the water bottle. And I had with me a stick that I picked up. It wasn't a big stick, about like this. And I kept doing this while I was walking. Tim was so annoyed. He finally got me to do it fewer times. And he said, just do it a couple times. You'll scare him away a mile wide or a quarter mile wide, and then we'll keep walking, then you can do it again. And this is how we had our walk, even though it didn't take away from the gorgeous scenery and the fact that we were where we wanted to be in the Rocky Mountains. And no, we didn't see another bear the entire time we were there, except the one that was 150 feet from our screened-in porch in our first stay up in Golden. So, but it was always on my mind. And so if I went again, I wouldn't even ask. I would simply get some bear spray. I would strap it to me. We would speak loudly. Somebody said just sing. Well, I'm not going to sing because I don't do it well. And we weren't talking enough. And some people said always go in a group of people and just keep the chatter going. They don't want to encounter us unless it happens to be a real ticked off bear, or unless we surprise them with their babies. Then you're in trouble because the protective instincts come in. So that was the trip. What did I think of Canada? Not only will somebody ask me what was your most noteworthy takeaway, and I'll say it's the people. Well, of course, the beautiful country. We didn't see a lot of animals. I was hoping to see a fox or a wolf or a badger. I don't know if badgers are there, just something. A couple of squirrels. We didn't see a lot of animals, and it might have been because, well, I don't know why. Because we see a lot of squirrels around here, and they're all over the place. But then again, they're sort of domestic squirrels burrowing in even the schoolyards. They have to get rid of them. Um, but the people were were okay. Back up, man. Country is beautiful. It's green. The forests are gorgeous. This we were here in July. It was July 6th through the 20th that we went. And so this wasn't a time for color, the way we would actually travel to the New England states, which Tim and I did, 3 weeks driving through the entire sort of circle of New England states for the color. We didn't go for that, but we saw the beautiful trees. We went into the meadows. We went into the mountains. No snow. We saw no, well, there's snow on the ground in patches, but there wasn't snow the way there was in June in Colorado, but we weren't here in June, so, or in Canada in June, so I'm sure they got that as well. But the people were kind, they were patient, they were accommodating. Drivers, I drove. Drivers weren't anxious to honk or speed in front of you or be aggressive. And I saw a difference. I saw the difference. And I felt good about it. I felt sort of cloaked in their kindness. And I thought that was very sweet. There are two of my well-respected people whose books I have that are Canadian. And one is Drina Burton. This is Drina's Kind Kitchen. She's a whole food, plant-based dietary culinary trainer. And she is, her work is known by, well, most of the field in whole food plant-based circles. And then known by everybody internationally is Brenda Davis. This is her book, the Diabetes Cookbook, from which I've taken a number of my favorite recipes, and they are both Canadians. And Brenda Davis, a Canadian dietitian, back 25, 28 years ago, took her career in her hands by deciding that she was going to shun animal products of all kinds in her diet and in what she recommended to her patients. That was unheard of back then. And she has made a huge difference in the health of tens of thousands of people as she trains them and teaches them how a whole food plant-based diet can and will prevent, and if it is something taken on later, it can reverse the symptoms of diabetes, not type 1, but certainly type 2, and cardiovascular disease and a number of things. So the people were kind. There are mosquitoes like crazy in wetlands and in mountains, and so that was something I hadn't really thought much about. Isn't that naive? Maybe we didn't prepare well enough for this. We should have bought the bear spray here, and I should have brought DEET, and I didn't bring DEET because I think it's too strong and I don't want it on my skin. But then I learned, because the host of the first place that we stayed gave us a can of DEET and said, just spray it on your clothes. And so we wore leggings, I wore leggings, not Tim, and longer sleeves, and just sprayed it in my clothes, and it made a difference, because otherwise they bit right through my leggings. I got out of the car the first day. We didn't get there until 8 o'clock that evening, and we had pulled into Calgary a lot earlier. But another thing is that in the summer in Canada, it's not dark. The sun doesn't go down until 10:30, so it's really not dark until 10:45. So people take up an activity at 5 in the afternoon that a lot of us would never consider. I wasn't ready to, because, for example, the host of our third Airbnb, his name is Dave, he's a pilot for one of the big airlines, and he was taking off and meeting friends for a ride, a cycling ride for a couple of hours at 5:30, 5:45, and doesn't get dark until 10:30, and then after that, then they would have a meal. So that was kind of cool too, and I hadn't thought about that. But next time, bear spray deep for the outside of the clothes. You can put it on you, but you really don't want that stuff absorbing into your skin, because it does cause a reaction. And and then in Calgary, we did something a little bit new, but this was our own, I'm going to call it prejudice. And in Calgary, every year, going through decades, they are famous for their Stampede Rodeo. When we first got into town, we were hungry, and they're an hour later, and we stopped at, well, and I'll talk more about the food and why I'm even talking about it, but we found a place to eat, a Vietnamese restaurant, because we know that Vietnamese restaurants are rich in vegetables, light in fat, in the use of oils in something especially like pho, which is their soup, their rice noodle soup. And we have made the decision to be whole food plant-based, and unfortunately I'm also restricted by having to stay away from gluten. So the regular noodles anywhere or bread anywhere, I can't have. It has to be gluten-free. And so Vietnamese almost always does that, and the place was terrific, actually. We loved the spring rolls, the rice paper made spring rolls around nothing but vegetables and tofu. Really, really tasty, and a peanut sauce, just lovely. And anyway, we had that's what we did first thing when we got there. But when we were at Calgary again, because we were going to be flying out of there, and so decided to stay for the last few days, they had a big TV on, and that TV was showing the events at Stampede, and Stampede was a 10-day rodeo fair, and I'll say, and food fair. And you can imagine, if you've been to fairs, what you see for food. In this case, there must have been 50 trucks. I don't think I'm exaggerating. Maybe it was 25. Serving, what do you think? Fried stuff. Everything fried, but doesn't matter. While we were watching the TV, we were saying, oh, that's not going to be our thing, because it was bronco busting, and it was everything about animals that if you have a vegan mindset, that's not entertainment. As a matter of fact, it's a little bit disturbing. But we went because somebody said, if you're in town and you're in town for Stampede, why wouldn't you go? And we thought, okay, we're going to go. And we were there the last day. And we didn't go to the rodeo, and we didn't go to the lassoing, and we didn't go to, I don't think they had a branding thing, but there's a lot of things that have to do with husbandry, because that's how, when you're in an agricultural area, that's how a lot of people do and have for generations, raised their families and made money. So at Stampede, they had corrals with a lot of different animals. Well, the part that got to us, when we walked into one of them, there are these calves and then cows, and then these signs of what part of the cow and the calf is labeled, like this part of the pig is called, or maybe it's this part of the pig is called the picnic, meaning that that's the roast you're going to get when you go to the store. Well, if you're in a vegan mindset, that absolutely doesn't compute. So we didn't stay there. We went out. There was nothing that we saw in any of those carts that we would eat because we don't eat sugar. We don't eat sweets. We don't eat fried foods. I mean, just shoot us. I'm just kidding. And we don't eat animal products of any kind at all. And but there was a dog show, and it was rescues. That was super cool. They rescue dogs, and they play up the propensity of that dog. For example, there were a number of herding dogs there because they have a propensity to do certain things. They're rather competitive, they're very energetic. So there were a number of different breeds that they had rescued, and these dogs were loved into performing at their best just for the fun of it. So if you look at my Aging Powerfully website, which you're on right, not website, Facebook, which you're on right now, you'll see photographs from Golden, our cabin in the woods, from Canmore and Banff and Lake Louise, and in Calgary, where you'll see the Calgary Tower, 518 feet tower that we went up, and you'll see photographs of the Peace Bridge. Apparently, Canadians fought vigorously for freedom before we ever entered that war in World War II. Didn't know that. And they were proud of what they have done to help with worldwide peace. And they have, at the other end of the Peace Bridge, from where we were on our bikes, you'll see Tim on his bike. We had gone through it, of course, and we saw what they were talking about. They had monuments along Montgomery Boulevard of the things that the Canadians had done in the last 100 years as it relates to world peace, and I liked that a lot. But back to Stampede, here's these dogs doing these things, and you'll see in the last one that I posted, which I did today, of some of the things in Calgary doing their stunts, and that's all I took in terms of photos of Stampede. And if you are Canadian, or I'm going to say if you're a Texan and you love to ride, you may have performed at Stampede, because we saw that. There are a lot of Americans, especially people that love rodeos, who go to Stampede to perform and to compete. And you'll hear me talking and saying, "Oh, lady, get a life." And that's just who and what we are. So, all of this to say, 2 weeks in Canada, loved it, loved what we saw, loved the people, loved the experience, and had challenges. Now, what were those challenges? That's all internal. That's not them, that's us. And this is part of what that is. When we got to Canada, the first thing we did, and we do this when we travel, we, as I said, travel in Airbnb or stay in Airbnbs, and that's so we have a home, kitchen and all of that. And we stop at a market. So we stopped at the market right after we had our Vietnamese pho soup meal, and we shopped. And one of the things that I was really surprised at was the price of produce. Well, of course, it's a very cold area that has sun maybe, 5 months, 4 months, 5 months out of the year, depending on how far north they are. And produce was really expensive. It doesn't matter. We're going to buy whatever we want. But think berries, for example. We always have fresh berries combination with our oatmeal. We're $8 and $9 a container. Certain vegetables like zucchini that we get around here for $1, $2 a pound were $4 and $5 a pound. And so it was really pricey for produce, which then explained why when we dined out, What we got was a lot of meat, but we never ordered the meat. And when we ordered vegetables, they were smaller amounts. And we are really heavy eaters, because if you're not eating animal fat, dairy, cheese, meat, and filling your plate with that, you're filling your plate with vegetables. We eat a lot of starches, but not starches that are fried, not starches that are whipped up with butter and cream. And so it was harder. For example, we could find a vegan meal or a vegetarian meal, but the salad didn't have a lot of what we add to our own salads, or what we look for when we go to a vegetarian or vegan meal, and that is a balance of protein. Again, that's not fried. There were things like tempura vegetables. Well, that's fried. There were things like fried tofu. We don't even do fried tofu because, an example, I don't count calories, but 3 ounces of tofu, which is 14 grams of protein, is maybe 70 calories. If you fry it, it's 280 to 300. So what's the difference? Pure fat. Fat that's reheated again and again and again. We don't eat fried food for that reason. And if you think that's neurotic, it has everything to do with health and longevity. And I had people say, you know what? I would rather die early than not have my patty melt with a greasy patty and fried onions and cheese and whatever else they put on their patty melts and their, mayo combination sauces. That's so easy to say until you're living it, and then thinking, oh my gosh, what can I do to stop the progression of this disease that's so uncomfortable, that's so scary, that's taking away my freedom. I'll do what it takes, but sometimes it's not as easy to reverse as simply making decisions early. I'm 71 and a half. Tim will be 70 next week, less than a week. And the two of us love being physical. People who aren't healthy aren't off-riding bikes for 35 miles. They're not taking 3-hour hikes up and down hills to see waterfalls and glacial meadows. We were able to do those things because we feel really good because of the way we eat. So if this seems restrictive or unnecessary, it's not. So why am I bringing it up now? Because that's what we have to think about when we travel. When we travel, there are things to consider. And those things to consider are what we're going to eat. Are we going to dine out a lot or not? If there are 3 meals a day, we were gone for 14 days, that would be whatever that is. Well, you do the math, 100? Oh man, I can't do it. 21 and 21, I guess, 42, something like that, minus flying days and all of that. It turned out that we really only had 7 meals out. They're usually lunches. Breakfasts are always the same. We do oats. I bring my own oat mixture, my own muesli. We buy soy milk that's high in protein, and we like it. We have berries that we buy. We have nuts and seeds, the seeds being flax seeds that I'll bring with me ground. And so we have these beautiful, healthy breakfasts with sliced banana and all of that on it. For lunch, if we went into the woods or were doing, even the bike rides, okay. Going into the woods, going off for a day, we brought lunches. So we had picnics along the way, and we mainly had lunches of lots of fruits and maybe some roasted potato, because that starch really makes you feel full, and PB&J, believe it or not. And you're going to be seeing this posted within a day or two, an oat flatbread that I made before we went. I made while we were there when I ran out. One of the places we stayed had a blender, and I made another batch of the oat bread because it's only oats and water. and seasonings, which I had brought with me anyway, because I always bring some seasonings with me, because you never know what you're going to get in a home. And it makes no sense to buy garlic salt or garlic powder and onion powder and Mexican seasoning for example, my stir fries, the tofu scrambles. So I just bring some of that stuff. So those are the things we think about and we do, which somebody who doesn't want to be bothered with this would avoid. But they're still going to be bothered with dietary decisions that can become really problematic, because what we found so much in our traveling was foods that were highly salted, very full of oils. Most of them were not fiber-rich foods, because the plant foods were somewhat restricted because they were more expensive. And had we not done our own meals, because we ate out 7 times, that means the rest of our meals were done in home, and they tend to be dinners. And I did things like, and I want to show you something I picked up while we were there, but I found it in our own health store. This is gluten-free teriyaki stir-fry marinade, and this is gluten-free Thai peanut spicy marinade and dip, mildly spicy Thai peanut marinade and dip. Boy, did these help, because with this one, the peanut, I did rice noodles, cooked rice noodles, and I made 2 meals of this. So it was handy to have this. Rice noodles that we added freshly sliced green onion to, put this on, and so we have these peanutty noodles. And you get this if you go into a Thai restaurant, but theirs is loaded with fat. This one is not. And stir fry lots and lots of vegetables, to which I added some teriyaki sauce. If I were home, I'd make my own sauces. But when we were traveling, there was no way I was going to have all these ingredients. And these 2 bottles allowed me to make 3 or 4 different kinds of meals, noodle-based, rice-based, always vegetable-based, tofu, cubes thrown in for the protein portion, or peanuts to enrich the protein portion of the meal. And we had wonderful meals with that. With this, you can eat out, and you can eat out every meal. And what you will find is what a lot of people find when they travel. They get home, their usual eating habits, unless that's how they eat in America, and actually it's probably even worse in America, because we have so many fast food restaurants. It's very hard to find food at a fast food restaurant that isn't something that's fried, that is loaded with fruits and vegetables, reasonably priced, and that isn't made out of 100 ingredients. Even the buns of the bread in most hamburgers in American fast food restaurants have anywhere from 20 to 30 different ingredients, because there are emulsifiers and preservatives and bread conditioners and all of that. So these things have to be decided. We this was interesting, and one of the things that brought this to light the most, and then I think I'll pretty well call this a day, except for something I want to say at the end. We went to an Indian fusion restaurant, and we had been walking Main Street in Calgary, or is this Canmore? It may have been Canmore, and there was a lovely Indian restaurant. Well, I spent I spent months and months in India. My son lived there, so I went there for a few months when they had their first baby. I went back again to visit for the child's first birthday. They were there 3 years. And I stayed a while, and then I stayed on my own and traveled the world on my own after my husband passed away, which was just before that baby was born. And I love Indian food. The problem with Indian food is that almost everything is made with ghee. Ghee is simply clarified butter. So there's a lot of fat in the food. Indians have a terrible time with cardiovascular disease, although A lot of them are vegetarian. Well, vegetarian means could be egg, could be cheese, um, could be milk, and definitely could be butter, unless it's pure vegetarian, or in other words, vegan. And you don't see a lot of that in Indian restaurants, so we don't dine in Indian restaurants very often. But we went by during the day and we saw that there this Indian fusion, modern Indian fusion restaurant, and that they had a vegan vegetarian section. We thought, oh, look what we found. And so we went in that night and we ordered, I mean, the meal was like $120. There wasn't all that much food, but we ordered a cauliflower. It sounded wonderful. And it was a cauliflower, seasoned cauliflower dish with beautiful rice, basmati rice. We had to ask them for nothing but the rice, because in their regular offering of basmati rice, it was filled with ghee. And we said, no, no, it has to be nothing but steamed rice. And and then we ordered a curry, a mushroom curry. That worked out. A lot of the dishes were fried. There was fried eggplant dishes. There was so many things cooked in oil, and we thought we'd be okay. I hadn't asked enough questions, because when the cauliflower came, it was so delicious, but we couldn't tell how it had been prepared. And it was a whole cauliflower, this whole gorgeous seasoned cauliflower, and this golden kind of it was more of a tan, this beautiful crust of seasonings on this wonderful rice bed. Well, as soon as I cut into it, and we did eat it, not all of it. We took some home, and then I couldn't eat anymore, and I never throw food away. I was going to incorporate it into a stir fry, and I couldn't even do that. I tossed the whole thing. But the whole cauliflower had been deep fried. Darn it. And the mushroom curry, when we spooned it up to put it over the rice, the mushroom curry, you could see the oil in it. Anyway, we ate our meal, and it's just not how we eat. And it was delicious, but it told us again, we have to prepare, and that's just not how we travel well. That's something we have to think about. Usually we can do it very easily, and we did it when we ate in, but when we ate out, we had some challenges. And here's my true confession, and this told me that I didn't handle this well, because we had 4 burger meals. 4. Now ask me how many times Tim and I have burgers here. Next to never. Because if I'm going to have a big bun, I'd rather have, instead of the calories on a big bun, because the buns, gluten-free buns, are usually, are seldom whole grain. At home, I would buy whole grain for Tim, and I would put mine in a lettuce wrap or something. But they had some nice gluten-free buns, but 2 of those 4, 2 of them were whole plant burgers. Yay, that was great. 2 of them were Impossible burgers, and if you've ever looked at the ingredients in Impossible burgers, they're 80% fat. They're loaded with saturated fat, and there's all kinds of other ingredients, including something called heme. And the heme just totally messes with our microbiome. So it's not what I normally would ever have done, but we did it 4 times, because we'd go to a restaurant, look at the menu, not see anything that would fill and satisfy, and ended up going to the hamburger or the burgers. And the more often we did it, I'm going to say the more often we would. And the takeaway on that is that we have to go into our life and the way we want it to proceed with a plan. And that plan has to be backed up by our purpose, what we want out of life. Tim and I want to go on for another 10, 20, maybe 30 years, and we're already old. The only way we'll do that is to live in a way that even the College of Lifestyle Medicine, that countries around the world are now promoting, and that is with a plant-based or plant-exclusive diet, because we live longer, better, without animal proteins. Plant proteins take much better care of our body. We live far better without animal fats, and we're not promoting cancerous cells with what we call IGF-1 in meat protein angiogenesis, the result of eating meats, and both of which encourage cell growth in terms of cancer. So we know all of this. We live for this reason like this. But we still, just within 2 weeks, we're starting to go into that I'm going to call it black hole of nutrition. And the most important part of those burger meals, what do you think they were? Fries. I say we don't eat fried food, and yet 4 times we got burgers and fries. And did we eat just a few fries? No, because Tim and I are volume eaters, and we ate everything on the plate. We did it 4 times. So this is a true confession. This is a takeaway, that it doesn't matter how easily, and I have believed that it has been easy to be whole food plant-based, to be very healthy, healthier than I've been in decades. Our medical numbers are so perfect that I've done Facebook Live videos on how healthy and impressed doctors were at our health parameters. And yet we fell into that within a 2-week period. I came back 3 pounds heavier in a 2-week period, when I can maintain a steady weight without any problem. So what is the takeaway? The takeaway is that the choices we make on a daily basis, even when they're reinforced by good results, have to be, I'm going to say, double and triple effort reinforced when we are on shakier ground. And we were on shakier ground, and this was our experience. This was my experience. Finally, this morning, because we always exercise, we went back to that regular exercise first thing in the morning and later in the day. I listened in these last 2 days to podcasts of Chef AJ. One, she was interviewing a Dr. Maria Rimmer, Rimmer. She's an MD who lost 80 pounds, and the title of that interview was How to Maintain a Lean Body and Eliminate Cravings Effortlessly. Another interview of Chef AJ, Anne and Jane Esselstyn. Caldwell Esselstyn is famous for how he taught that we could reverse heart disease with a plant-based diet. And the title of their interview, How to Be a Plant-Powered Woman Warrior. Anne Esselstyn, Caldwell Esselstyn's wife, Jane is his daughter, is now 88 or 89, and she runs circles around people. She's so energetic and so healthy because this is how she's lived for the last 30, 40 years. And another one's with a cardiac RN, and the title is Cardiac RN Discovers Chronic Disease Reversal with Plants. Listening to those, because I didn't do any of that while we were away, because I couldn't get that kind of receptivity away from a Wi-Fi. Listening to those reminded me again, and may have been what would have made the difference if I had been doing what I do every day, and that is when I'm working out, I'm listening to information that reinforces our decisions and the meaning behind them, the reasons behind them, the rationale behind them. So I'm going to end with that bit of encouragement, and that is that I know that people who follow me are, many of them are whole food plant-based, some whole food exclusive, some looking for better health, some looking to reduce weight. I had an eating disorder. I overcame that, some because they know that that's not how they want to live, as I didn't, and were able to reverse it. That's one of the reasons that I wrote this book, Aging Powerfully, with powerfully being 10 lifestyle modalities. This is an acronym. 10 lifestyle modalities that can help one eat, live, and age with power, and results that they just love. But I'll tell you something, without regular reinforcement, I'm coming back to say, after 2 weeks in what was heaven or paradise, I came back with the impression that, man, one has to pay attention, be determined, and stay on your game, or even though we didn't fall that far off, in other words, we didn't have ribs, fried chicken, and deep fried Oreos that they have at the Stampede rodeo, we still didn't stay with what we had been committed to in the way we otherwise would have. So that's all I have to say. Hope this hasn't taken up too much of your time with what you may think is drivel. And take care of yourself. Have a great day, because I know I'm going to. And thank you for your time. Bye-bye.